Okay, let's start with a picture. Think about someone like Mrs. D. For years, maybe she was the heart of the family, right? Really energetic, engaged, didn't miss a thing. She probably enjoyed those everyday sounds, the hum of traffic outside, maybe a clock ticking in the hall, familiar stuff. But lately, it's all changed. That traffic noise, it's like a jet engine now, the clock. Feels, I don't know, aggressive. And if her daughter calls her name from another room, she doesn't answer. Just covers her ears, pulls back, says things like, it's all just too much. Now, this kind of shift, this sudden irritation or withdrawal you might see in older adults, even those who seem cognitively fine, well, it often gets brushed off. Moodiness, maybe anxiety. But what we're looking at today, based on our sources, suggests something deeper. It's often a really profound behavioral response, and it's tied to sensory sensitivity.
Exactly. And that's what we're digging into. Why does the world, the familiar world, suddenly feel so aggressively demanding for some people?
Yeah.
Our mission today really is threefold. First, to define this sensory sensitivity, not as just a preference, but as a neurological thing. Second, understand why it happens neurologically, what's going on in the brain. And maybe most importantly, pull out practical uh, behavioral supports, things you can actually do to help restore comfort, dignity, and that connection for someone you care about, or maybe even for yourself.
Yeah, because if you can see it as exhaustion, not irritation, well, that changes how you react, doesn't it?
Yep.
So let's start right there. What's actually happening inside the brain when someone feels like every little sound is like a physical assault? Let's try and unpack that.
Okay. We need to talk about the brain's built-in filters. Think of your brain like a super busy switchboard operator. All day, every day, thousands of signals are coming in. The smell of coffee, how your chair feels, the light overhead, maybe a siren way off in the distance. Now, a healthy brain, it's brilliant at prioritizing. It automatically screens out the unimportant stuff, the fridge humming, the feeling that you're close, so you can focus on a conversation or a task. It's like your personal spam filter. Sensory sensitivity, let's call it SS, happens when that filter system starts to, well, falter. It loses its flexibility. Suddenly, that switchboard operator, they can't easily tell the difference between what's important, like someone calling your name, and what's just background noise, like that clock ticking. So all the sensory input starts feeling equally urgent, equally important, and, yeah, equally loud or intense.
Ah, okay. So it's less about the ears or the eyes themselves and more about how the brain is processing and organizing everything. That sounds incredibly tiring. It's constantly reacting to everything around you.
It is exhausting. Think about trying to read something really complex like a contract, but you got three different radios playing at the same time, all overlapping. That's kind of the cognitive overload we're talking about with SS.
And the triggers seem so wide-ranging. Looking at the sources, it's clear this isn't just one sense. It makes it really hard for family or caregivers to even pinpoint the cause sometimes. You mentioned background noise, especially, like overlapping voices at a busy dinner table. That can be much worse than one single loud sound, apparently. But it's visual, too, right? Like the specific discomfort from bright fluorescent lights, those cool toned ones, sometimes they have that flicker you don't even consciously see, but the brain picks it up. And even small things become huge stressors. A sudden temperature shift, a strong perfume, or maybe cleaning products, even the texture of clothes or bedding, rough fabrics.
Yes, exactly. And they pile up. It's not usually just one thing in isolation. If you're dealing with a strong smell and harsh lighting and chaotic sound all at once, the brain just goes into distress. We wants to shut down, basically, seek relief. And that leads directly to those behaviors we see, the ones that, caregivers often misinterpret. So if you see someone covering their ears or maybe avoiding parties they used to love, or suddenly refusing to wear certain clothes or always heading for the dimmest, quietest room in the house, that's likely not moodiness. It's not disinterest. It's a stress response. They might seem easily startled or just really withdrawn.
Right. So to someone watching, it might look like they're being difficult. Like, why won't you just come join us? But what's the real message behind that behavior? What are they actually communicating?
The real message, the honest one, is something like, my environment doesn't feel predictable anymore. It doesn't feel safe. I can't trust my brain to filter things correctly, so I have to physically remove myself to escape the overload. They're choosing survival, choosing peace over joining in.
Yeah. That difference, seeing it as neurological defense versus defiance, that feels like the absolute key to helping. Which brings us nicely to the neurology of it all. Because the sources are clear, this isn't just a preference, it's rooted in actual brain changes. This part's really interesting.
Yeah, it connects right into how we manage attention and regulate our emotions. There was research, a 2021 study, I believe, in Frontiers in Aging Neuroscience. They didn't just theorize, they found a measurable link. What they found were actual changes in the volume of gray matter in certain brain regions. This was in older adults who were experiencing this sensory overresponsivity. Now, gray matter,
Hmm.
that's where the main processing happens in the brain, right? So in these specific areas, the ones involved in directing attention and managing emotional reactions show physical changes. It strongly suggests the basic system for filtering stimuli is, well, altered, or at least working much, much harder.
Wow. So the big takeaway there is what looks like stubbornness or maybe just not wanting to cooperate, it could actually be a sign of a real neurological struggle. Their brain is using up so much energy just trying to cope with the normal volume of the world.
Precisely. They aren't choosing to be irritable. Their brain's filters are under immense strain, leading to this higher baseline level of stress. And the stress, it kicks off a really powerful behavioral cycle. And we absolutely need to understand that cycle if we want to help break it.
Okay, walk us through that cycle. How does it work?
Well, it starts with that intense discomfort, right? The sensory overload. The immediate and frankly rational response is to avoid it. So
Yeah.
leave the noisy room, maybe go to bed early, cover the ears. And because doing that works, it brings instant relief. Even if just for a short time, the brain learns very quickly, okay, that helped. I'll do that again next time. The behavior gets strongly reinforced.
Ah, that short-term relief trap. It's so effective in the moment, but the long-term cost. It sounds quite significant. If avoidance becomes the go-to strategy, the person's world just gets smaller and smaller, doesn't it? They stop doing things they enjoyed, miss family events, maybe even hesitate to leave the house. And that loss of engagement, it really hits their dignity, their quality of life. So the goal has to be breaking that cycle,
Yeah.
showing that comfort and participation can happen together.
Absolutely. And that means we have to focus on adjusting the environment. You can't just demand someone change their neurological response. It doesn't work like that. What's needed are gentle, predictable support strategies.
Right. Let's shift to those practical things listeners can do. The sources laid out a pretty good roadmap here. Step one seems to be just careful observation. Identify those patterns early on.
Yeah, don't just guess. Observe. Keep a simple log, maybe notes on your phone. Track when the distress happens. What time of day is it usually? What sounds were present? What kind of lighting? Was there a particular texture involved, like a towel or clothing? You're basically playing detective, looking for those repeatable triggers, the hidden threats in the environment.
Okay, so once you have an idea of the triggers, then you move to adjusting the environment, making simple swaps that can have a big impact. Let's talk about lighting again, because that seems to come up a lot.
It does. Those fluorescent tubes and even some cooler LED bulbs, they often have that bluish tint and that flicker rate. Even if we don't consciously see it, a sensitive brain can register it as, well, like static. It's irritating. The fix can be pretty straightforward. Swap them out. Go for warm-toned bulbs, full-spectrum incandescent if you can find them, or soft white LEDs. Warmer light is just generally easier on the brain's processing.
And what about noise? You mentioned reducing echo. That sounds subtle, but maybe powerful. How do you actually do that in a practical way?
Echo or reverb. It's just auditory chaos for a brain that's struggling to filter. It makes one voice sound like many overlapping voices. The fix is usually about adding soft surfaces, things that absorb sound. So throw rugs on hard floors, heavy curtains on windows, upholstered furniture instead of hard chairs. Even things like tapestries, bookcases full of books, they all help soak up sound waves, reduce that bounce. It just makes speech clearer, less jarring. It's about simplifying the soundscape. And we should think about simplifying the visuals too. Cluttered surfaces, really busy wallpaper patterns, lots of movement. That all adds to the sensory tax, if you will. Simplifying doesn't mean making things sterile or isolating. It just means creating spaces where the eyes can rest easily.
Makes sense. And then there's the strategy of offering predictability. This seems crucial for rebuilding trust. Trust that the environment isn't going to suddenly assault the senses. That means things like narrating your actions, right? Even small ones.
Yes, narrating beforehand lets the person's brain get ready for the input. It turns a potential surprise into an expected event, much less jarring. So don't just flip a switch. Say something like, okay, in about 3 seconds, I'm going to turn on the lamp over the table. Don't just suddenly touch their arm. Say, I'm just going to put my hand on your arm now. Okay. It's fundamental for building that feeling of safety again.
And there are also actual tools that can help with regulation. The sources called them calming tools.
Right. Things like deep pressure can be very grounding, very calming. Weighted blankets are a great example. That even pressure across the body is a strong, calming signal that doesn't require much cognitive effort to process. We can also think about gentle background sounds, like a white noise machine, maybe on a low-frequency setting. It can provide a stable, predictable sound environment that the brain can kind of anchor to masking some of the more jarring noises. Soft fabrics are another simple one.
Okay, let's tackle some common points of confusion for caregivers, starting with that hearing aid issue. It seems counterintuitive. Why are sounds still too loud, even with hearing aids in?
Ah, yes, this is so important. Standard hearing aids are designed to amplify sound. That's their main job.
Hmm.
But unless they've been very carefully tuned by an audiologist specifically to filter out background noise frequencies and only boost speech frequencies, which is a specialized kind of tuning, they just make everything louder. They amplify the fridge hum, the traffic, the echo, and the speech. So they can actually make the sensory overload much, much worse for someone already struggling. The aid itself becomes a source of pain.
That really explains why some people might resist wearing them, even if they have hearing loss. Okay, and the other really critical point was about communication. That difference between correcting someone and validating their experience. When someone says, that's too loud, or that light's hurting my eyes, what's the instinctive reaction we need to avoid?
The gut reaction for many people is to correct the person's reality, right? Oh, it's not that loud, or the clock's barely ticking, you can hardly hear it. But doing that is like telling them their own internal experience is wrong. It feels like an attack, and it just ramps up the distress because it says, I don't believe you. Your reality isn't valid.
So the advice is crystal clear. Don't correct, validate first, acknowledge the struggle. What does that actually sound like?
It sounds like empathy, basically.
Hmm.
Instead of arguing about the volume, you validate the feeling. Something like, wow, that sound feels really overwhelming right now, doesn't it? Or tell me what that feeling is like for you. You're not agreeing that the clock is objectively deafening, but you are agreeing that their experience of it is overwhelming. That builds trust, lowers defenses immediately. It creates that little bubble of safety needed for cooperation.
And then if you do manage to get that cooperation, maybe they stay in the room for a few minutes. You need to reinforce that success, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You have to actively teach the brain that safety is possible again, at least in certain situations. So when the person manages to sit through 5 minutes of a noisy dinner or handles a slightly challenging environment without immediately needing to escape, you acknowledge it right away. Say something specific like, you handled that noise so calmly just now. I know that must have been tough. That's positive reinforcement. It helps lock in that feeling of accomplishment, that coping is possible.
So if we tie all this together, the faltering filters, the brain needing predictability, the power of validation, it really forces us to reframe the whole situation. When Mrs. D covers her ears or leaves the room, she's not rejecting her family. She's trying to protect her own neurological peace.
Exactly. The world for her has literally become sharper, louder, more unpredictable. Our role then becomes acting as that external filter, the one her brain is struggling to provide internally.
Right. So wrapping this up, what's the main takeaway for you listening? The goal isn't necessarily silence. Often, that's impossible, and it can be isolating too. The real goal is restoring a sense of safety. When that safety returns through these gentle, predictable environmental tweaks and supportive interactions, connection usually follows naturally.
And that shift in perspective, from seeing stubbornness or moodiness to seeing a neurological struggle, that changes everything. It changes how you approach every interaction. It moves you away from potential conflict and towards collaborative support.
The sources mention how sometimes the best solutions are nonverbal. Things like smart lighting that adjusts gradually, or simple visual cues that guide comfort without needing conscious thought. So, building on that, here's a final thought for you to consider today. If the core issue is often a lack of predictability, what's one simple, maybe even nonverbal change you could make in your environment or the environment of someone you know? Could it be swapping a light bulb, putting up a thicker curtain, clearing just one cluttered surface? Think about how even a small increase in predictability could restore a measure of safety. Sometimes that quiet environmental support can be the most powerful message of care you can offer.